Hi you guys, and welcome back to another true crime and makeup time video. If you're new here, my name is Zara and I post a new true crime video every single week. So if you love makeup and you love true crime, definitely hit that subscribe button, guys. It would mean so much to me. And if you have any cool, unknown, rare case suggestions, definitely leave them down in the comments below and I will check them out. So today's case was actually one that was requested a while back, but when I went back to look for the comment, that comment's now gone. So whoever requested this case, thank you. Now this case is pretty upsetting, and I do want to preface it by saying it involves domestic violence and also child abuse. For most of us, domestic violence is a distant and just a horrific sort of topic, something we read about in newspapers or hear about on TV. But for others, it's real, a daily and inescapable nightmare if you are a victim or a survivor. So it can be upsetting to some, so I'm just putting that warning out there. And today's case is about Tamica Mullaley and her 10-month-old son, Charlie Mullaley. And he was known as Charlie Boy, and it takes place in Australia. There's not a lot of information about Tamica's past, and a lot of this information actually comes from a documentary and a book. But this case doesn't have a lot of, I guess, buzz around it. It takes place in Western Australia, and I had never heard about it. So I think it's important to share, and yeah, let's talk about today's case. So this case begins on the night of 19th March 2013, and I can't believe 2013 is nearly 10 years ago. So Tamika was at a birthday party for her father, Ted, and Ted ran a successful trucking business in Broome, Western Australia, and he loved his grandchildren and would actually spend a lot of his free time looking after and spending time with his grandchildren. The night of Ted's birthday, the family gathered together and they just gathered for some cake, and Tamika actually had plans to go out after Ted's celebration. She had a son named Charlie. He was 10 months old, and she asks her father, well, can I leave Charlie with you tonight so I can go out? Now, normally Ted would be like, sure, leave the kid with me, but on this particular night, he was like, look, if I take Charlie, then Tamika might be a little bit more irresponsible that night. So he wanted her to just have accountability and come home, at a decent hour. So he declined her request to watch Baby Charlie that night. And this is a decision that Ted still regrets to this day. Now, what Ted didn't know was that at this time, there was already potential drama going on. You see, Tamika had just entered into a new relationship with a new boyfriend, and his name was Mervyn Bell. He was not Charlie's biological father. And a few days prior, Tamika had actually been in Perth. And when she returned from Perth, there were rumors, like I'm guessing her community was like a small community, like friendship circle. So there were rumors circulating in her little, circle that Mervyn had been cheating on her while she was away. And that afternoon, earlier that day, Tamika already noticed that Mervyn was being a bit strange with her and a bit weird with her and distant with her. So Tamika was pretty pissed off and she was starting to believe these rumors. So she's like, look, I'm going to go and confront him later tonight. And she was just building up essentially the courage to confront him. So after her dad says no that night, Tamika leaves her dad's party, loads up baby Charlie, and heads on over to her friend's house where Mervyn was going to meet her there, and they had all planned to just like hang out and drink that night. Now, when she had gotten to her friend's house, Charlie had already fallen asleep at that time. So she takes Charlie, goes and puts him in the living room of her friend's house, like on the floor to sleep. And then she heads on out to the backyard, and Mervyn was already there at that time. So they start drinking, and as they're drinking, Tamika just like mentions these rumors that, I've heard some rumors that you're cheating on me. So what's all this about? And immediately once Tamika does this, Mervyn just starts being a douchebag, being a dick, and just being an asshole to her. And she was just like, okay. So now at this point, it's getting late and Tamika's like, whatever, I have my baby with me, so I'm not going to deal with this anymore. So she decided to walk close by to her friend's house to pick up to borrow a stroller for baby Charlie so that she can take Charlie home. That's something I don't really understand. So I was like, how did you get from your father's house to the friend's house. Maybe it was all like within walking distance. So she just carried Charlie with her to her friend's house, put him down to sleep. But like going to her house, maybe it was a longer walk or something like that. So she wanted a stroller to be able to take him, maybe because he was sleeping. She didn't want to hold him, you know, many reasons, but I don't know how her transportation situation was. So she begins her walk to this friend's house, and what she didn't know at the time is that Mervyn had been following her in his car during this whole time as she was walking. Soon into her walk, he jumps out of his car and he begins to attack Tamika. He just lost it. He just began punching her, and she tried to get away and defend herself, but she couldn't make it. He would just come up behind her and then bash her some more. That's when she started to get hurt pretty badly, and during this attack, he actually approached her, and like as he was hitting her, he was tearing at her clothes, eventually stripping her naked. Now, this was happening in a residential like area in a street. So a woman nearby hears the commotion and she's like, what the hell's going on? So she looks outside her window and she can see Mervyn like bashing Tamika. So she ran outside and tells him like, leave, leave, leave. I'm going to call the police. And so she begins to call the police, and then Mervyn runs back to his car. And this woman happened to be a nurse. Like she was a nurse that worked in a local hospital. So she began to tend to Tamika. And as she was doing this, she had already called the police. As she was doing this, Mervyn gets back in his car and then aims the car at the two of them and then tries to run them over, but he misses. The nurse then started yelling at him and telling him like, you need to leave right now. Like, I've called the police. And then Mervyn, you know, panics and he just like runs off, like drives off in his car. As they're waiting for the police, this woman, I'm guessing she asked Tamika, and Tamika was like, call my father. And she ends up calling Ted as well. And Ted is now like on his way. So now she calls Ted, but obviously the police are on their way first. At this time, Ted was already in his bed. And when the phone rang and it was the nurse on the other side, he like jumps out of bed and then rushes to grab Tamika. And Ted claims that even in that moment, he was really desperate to get to Tamika before the police did. Now, it's important to mention here that Tamika was an Indigenous Australian woman. Indigenous Australians or Australian First Nations are people with familial heritage from or membership in the ethnic groups that lived in Australia before British colonization. They include Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Australia. So now the reason Ted wanted to rush and get there so quickly, because like many Indigenous Australians, Tamika didn't trust the police. When officers arrived, she was actually sheltering herself in the woman's carport, and she had covered herself in a bedsheet that one of the neighbors had brought for her. She was bleeding naked and she was begging out like for her dad. Now, from what I understand, Tamika was clearly in a horrible state. She was bleeding, covered in blood. And when the police arrived, she was yelling at them like, go away, no one wants you here. And I'm guessing she had this behavior because maybe she just didn't have a good experience with the police in the past, or, you know, look, if she's got Indigenous Australian friends, which I'm sure she did, maybe they didn't have the best experiences with the police. So she clearly felt like she had a reason to not trust them, and not trust them in the moment where she is super vulnerable. She's in her most vulnerable state at the moment. So even while she's yelling at the police, like, go away, the police just keep like hounding her and questioning her. Police in their reports state that Tamika was calling them cunts and telling them to fuck off. And Tamika didn't want the police to help because in her mind, she believed the police not to be that helpful in Broome. She just wanted to be taken care of by her dad. And I believe this was because A, she was naked and covered in blood and probably embarrassed to even be in that situation. And then B, she was literally on a main street in this residential area. And at this point now, I'm guessing everyone's like coming out of their homes and like wondering what the commotion is. Now, clearly Tamika is the victim here, but the police refused to leave because they said, we have been called, you know, for a disturbance and we need to know what's happening. We can't just leave. And they were apparently called for a disturbance where someone reported that a woman had been kicked out of her car and she was just standing there naked on the street. Like, completely wrong situation, but okay. The weird thing is, you can see Tamika bleeding. You can see she's been hurt. Why have they not called for medical assistance right away. She was beaten up, seriously injured, and a victim of assault. One officer even noted that Tamika had blood surrounding her right eye. And apparently this is normally or clearly a sign of significant head trauma, which the police should have known. And this alone would have explained her erratic behavior and her faulty memory. Police should have acted on their duty of care to treat Tamika as a victim first rather than a suspect. Also, the nurse witness was already there to give an account of what she had seen. You know, this freaking guy who was bashing her also tried to run her over. So why are they not taking her statement? Then when Ted arrived, he arrived just after the police, he tells them like, look, Mervyn Bell did this. Mervyn Bell is his name. He's the one that did this. So now that the father has said that, and I understand they can't rely solely on the father, but they've given a name, why is the police still hounding Tamika? Tamika was in clear distress. She didn't want to talk. She literally just wanted Mervyn arrested so she could go home. So the police at this point, they keep pushing her. So Tamika, now it's not the right thing to do, but clearly she's not in the right frame of mind. She spits at one of the officers. The officer's name was Moore, and he was like, that's it. And he lunged at Tamika. Now the crazy thing throughout all of this, which I only realized like when I looked further into the case, because there was no mention of it, this entire time, from what I can understand, Tamika had baby Charlie with her. So was she holding baby Charlie when Mervyn was bashing her? Like, why is that not more of an issue to the police, that there was a baby there? I like, that blows my mind. I don't know how or where, you know, Charlie was the entire time that Mervyn was attacking her, but from my understanding is she hadn't grabbed, like she couldn't grab the stroller yet. So I don't think he was actually in the stroller and Tamika was attacked. It seems like she was still on her way to get it. So that thought alone like freaks me out. Like what Charlie would have been thinking, seeing his mother getting hurt. Like that 10 months old is not baby where they don't get it. Like I'm sure he was crying. So now in this street, it seems like there were a few people that like knew Tamika as well. Like I guess it was a small town. So Ted grabs Charlie off Tamika and gives him to Mervyn's cousin's girlfriend or partner, and she's only known as Miss McKinley. So what happened is that Mervyn's cousin, Mr. Linden, lived on this same street that this commotion took place, and he lived there with his partner, Miss McKinley, and her sister, Miss Hill. So Ted gives Charlie to McKinley and says like, here, hold him while he's trying to protect Tamika, essentially from the police. So Tamika runs away from the police and then they chase her around Ted's car until Tamika trips, and then as she falls over, Officer Moore, he goes and he gets on top of Tamika and lays a knee into her back. Keep in mind, again, she's the victim in this. Like, she's the victim. Tamika's screaming for help, and then when Officer Moore like kind of like releases her, she jumps up and she enters her father's car and she like locks all the doors. The police then surround the car and they're like bashing the windows, like, come on, like open up. And eventually they break one of the windows and then like drag her out. They then put Tamika in the police car and they tell Ted, we're taking Tamika to jail. She's literally bleeding, seriously injured, blood on her right eye, naked, like has a baby, and they're taking her to jail. And I understand, yes, she's acting crazy, but get her some treatment first. She is hysterical also because she probably has a baby with her. Like, it's crazy. So Ted, when they tell him like, oh, we're going to take her to jail, Ted's screaming like, you can't do that. You can't do that. Like, you need to take her to the hospital. Ted's like, you need to call an ambulance. You don't need to take her to jail. And then one of the officers says to Ted, oh, an ambulance won't come. And then when Ted goes, why? He goes, it just won't. So Ted then says like, well, you've got to take her to the hospital. But they just ignore Ted. Now, Ted also allegedly asks one of the female officers that was there to please take baby Charlie with you, you know, because they have access to, like, you know, getting CPS involved and just having, or even taking the baby to the hospital so he's being looked after or something like that. Like, I don't really know what the protocol is, but I'm pretty sure they would have taken him and put him somewhere, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. But they refused. So allegedly, the officers then ask Miss McKinley and Miss Hill, like, hey, can you look after the baby for a while and take him away from the scene? And Ted agrees to this, and so does Tamika, because the situation is so wild and chaotic that it's like, we better just get Charlie out of here and with someone that they sort of know, rather than like, where are they going to put him? They're going to take him with them to the hospital, to the police station. Like, it doesn't really make sense. It's a 10-month-old baby. It's nighttime. He probably needs to sleep. He'll probably be fussy. And I'm sure they didn't want to agree. I'm telling you, as a parent, you never want to put your baby with someone you don't really like know, but they probably had no choice because Ted can't take the baby with him. He needs to go help Tamika. So police now have Tamika in the car and they say they're taking her to the hospital. So Ted is now following the police officers in his car, and Charlie is with Mervin's cousin's partners, but technically with Mervin's cousins because it's his home. I can't even imagine how Tamika was feeling at this point. I'm sure she just wanted Charlie with her, but she can't. She's so injured. And I also don't believe she was in the right frame of mind to be caring for a baby. So they get to hospital, and unfortunately Tamika is behaving pretty hysterically that even the doctors refuse to help her because they're like, we can't deal with someone like this. But at this point, realistically, anyone of authority is probably a threat to Tamika. Like, she just doesn't get it in her frame of mind that she's in at that point. So Ted like begs her, like, please calm down. And then finally a doctor, what do you call it? Like, assesses Tamika's injuries. And the doctor said, lucky he did, because Tamika's injuries turned out to be life-threatening. She had a lacerated kidney, her spleen was bruised, and she had internal bleeding from Mervin's beating. The doctor said that if the police hadn't taken her to hospital that night, she would have died in her cell at the station. So now that Tamika is being treated at the hospital, Ted drives back to Mervin's cousin's home to go and pick up baby Charlie because he's like, okay, all right, my daughter's being taken care of. Let me go and get my grandson. When he gets there, he knocks on the door to Mr. Linden's home, and they open the door and there's no baby Charlie. Now, the crazy thing is, and I don't know if this is something that should have been prefaced before leaving Charlie with them, but the couple tells Ted, oh, Charlie isn't here. Mervin already came and picked him up. Mervin's not even his biological father. Now, Ted is frantic. He's like, what? And I mean, like I said before, should they have prefaced to him like, hey, by the way, don't give my baby away to anyone? Like, I don't know, maybe Mervin threatened them. Like, it's his cousin. So maybe he's like, oh, I trust my cousin. Like, I don't know why they did it, but they were wrong. They shouldn't have done that. Ted is now frantic. He loses it. Like I said, he was close to his grandchildren. So he freaks out and he rushes back to the hospital, and he finds a police officer, Constable Carberry, sitting in his car outside the hospital, like in his patrol car. So he approaches him and he goes, please, I need help. He's taking the baby. Ted was freaking out. He's saying, Mervin's not Charlie's biological father. Like, he had no right to take him. And he's like, and he tells this officer at this point, he goes, I'm really concerned. I'm really worried. I'm afraid he's going to harm Charlie or even kill him. Carberry doesn't care. And he tells Ted, well, we haven't got any like cars, like patrol cars to like go look for Charlie. And then Ted's like, what do you mean you don't have any patrol cars? And he goes, well, one's here with me. I'm sitting in this one. And the other one's down the station, like at the station. Ted finds out later that the second car, apparently this police station only had 2 freaking patrol cars, finds out that the second patrol car is back at the station, writing up charges to book Ted and Tamika for obstruction of justice. And they are also wanting to charge Tamika with assault. So Ted for obstruction and then Tamika for assaulting a police officer. So was that, filing those charges against Tamika and Ted more important than looking for an abducted child? So Ted, now even more upset, now races down to Broome Police Station to report Charlie missing. And, he does this hoping that the police are going to go rush and look for Charlie. Ted also gave them some valuable information, telling them that Mervin's actually driving one of Ted's vehicles. So he knew exactly which car he had taken, so he knows what car Mervin was in at the time, so we know what to look for him in. And one thing I was thinking, like, did Mervin even have a car seat this entire time? Like, he's taken baby Charlie, but where's the car seat? Like, did Ted just have car seats in every car? I'm guessing not. So that's something I just thought of. So great. The officer then makes it like a note on, the situation and says, Ted came into the station reeking of alcohol. He seemed aggressive and he seemed irrational. Well, you would be too if your grandchild was just abducted by someone who just bashed your daughter. So anyway, Ted, when he finds this out about the alcohol comment, he's like, I haven't had a drop of alcohol in 30 years. Ted claims that this officer just profiled him, looked at him, and just thought of him as just another black fella drunk, which is just so sad that these stereotypes are just placed on people, especially Indigenous Australians. I mean, this man is doing his best, driving around, trying to get help for his grandchild, and all the authorities that came across him, all they saw was this stereotype that they concocted in their heads. Ted then calls 000 because he's like, okay, no one's helping me. I'm going to go directly to the helpline. So he calls 000 and he reports Charlie missing. And he says, someone please take me seriously. This man is going to kill my grandchild. Please take me seriously. And this woman kind of, the 000 dispatch lady, she seems kind of concerned. Like you can see she's like, what? And she is trying to help. So she says, okay, I'm just going to contact the sergeant in the Broome police station. And when this sergeant is contacted, his name is Sergeant Wright, he makes this statement or comment saying, oh, we know all about Ted. He's been obstructing the police all night and hindering our police investigation all night. He's been causing like a chaos for 2 hours. And what I don't get is, can someone explain how he's obstructing justice? Isn't he trying to get justice? How is he obstructing it? In fact, they are obstructing him. Now, when I listen to the dispatch call, I don't think Ted sounds irrational, agitated. He sounds upset. No one was taking him seriously. Like hearing his call upset me because it's upsetting to hear someone in distress and the people that you call to help aren't helping you. I can only imagine his frustration and his fear. It's like you literally know what can happen and no one wants to believe you or help you. And my heart breaks for him as a grandparent because my own dad, like, I know how much he loves my son, like, and I know how he would be in a situation like this. You can see the love he has for my son, like you can feel it when they're together. And I feel like that's the kind of love that Ted had for his grandson, and it just breaks my heart to know that. Imagine how he was feeling, you know. So Ted now, you know, he's thinking, okay, well, I've told the police what, car Mervin's driving, and I've told the police like how serious this situation is. So he's like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go look for Charlie myself. So he starts driving around like the bush area looking for Charlie and Mervin. And he's thinking, you know, maybe Mervin's gone and hidden somewhere and, you know, he's just parked in the corner. And he's trying to like hide out. So that's where Ted goes and begins to look. And unfortunately, he ends up getting a flat tire. So he needs to call his friend to come and pick him up and like help him out. As this happens, it's like nearly 3 a.m. And he gets a freaking text from Mervin. And I'll read you what it says. And it's like badly written, doesn't make sense. It's like mumbo jumbo. But he says, talk to us. I'm putting welfare on the both of us. Can't even look after your own grandchild? ? What now? Popo coming for yous. Ha ha. What a son of a bitch. For real. Knowing that he has Charlie and he's going to send a message like that taunting the grandfather. Like that's insane. So Ted now obviously like got these text messages. He goes back to Broome police station and he asks, like he shows the text messages to the officers saying, look what he's saying to me. And he asks the police officers, like, can we just do a quick trace, like of where Mervin is? And the police's response was, nah, it's too expensive. It's $800 to run a check like that. So are they basically telling him that your grandchild is not worth the $800 that our office would need to spend to run this check? Sounds like it. Essentially, baby Charlie wasn't worth it. So Ted then says, well, what if I pay for it? Like I'll pay the $800. Like let's run this check. Let's see where he is. Let's find him. And the officer still declines and says, just wait till the morning when we bring in an Aboriginal liaisons officer. Why? Like, is that the only way anyone can deal with Ted? If there's an Aboriginal liaisons officer like with them, like why can't they just deal with him? He's just a normal human being. By the way, also these like entire encounters that Ted would come to the police station, they're all recorded on CCTV camera footage. Police stations have that. And it was found that during these, sessions where Ted would come in, Ted seemed completely reasonable, completely like, he was animated at times, but then he seemed calm at other times because I guess he was trying to like help, but then like, oh, okay, calm down because they're not going to take me seriously kind of thing. The officer even shook Ted's hand as Ted left the police station, but in his same report that he made, he claims that Ted was super aggressive and irrational. So as Ted leaves the police station, he then sees that same constable, Wright, following him in a patrol car, flashing his like flashlight at him, and Ted responds like, don't shine that fucking torchlight on me. And Constable Wright says to him, well, you stop calling 000. He's basically telling him, stop calling for help about your freaking grandchild, stop calling about it. Like I can't believe this even took place in Australia. We hear so many things like this happening in America, but like the fact that it happened in Australia, like allegedly, it's crazy. So at this point, Ted's like, well, what other choice do I have? He had no other choice but to just go home and sleep until morning time, where he could then, look for Mervyn and baby Charlie in a more productive way. Now, after Ted goes home and, tries to sleep essentially to get some rest, this wasn't the end of his encounters with the police, allegedly. According to the police report, after Ted goes home to rest, he once again calls 000 and he says, oh, I spoke to Mervyn, everything's fine. Charlie is safe and you don't need to look for him anymore. This was updated at 4:15 a.m. on his file, like on the police report. When Ted later found this out, he was like, what? This call never happened. I never called the police and told them Charlie's fine. Why would I go home to rest to look for Charlie in the morning, but then report that he's fine, don't worry about looking for him? Like, Ted disputes that this, and if this call took place, he said, where's the recording of it? That particular call wasn't recorded, but all the others were. Like, it doesn't make sense. Now, I feel like what's very clear is this. None of the police officers chose to take Ted seriously. They didn't even file a missing persons report for baby Charlie immediately. Instead, they chose to focus on charging Tamika and Ted on crimes they believe they had committed, a joke, and they claimed that they didn't even know that it was Mervyn who assaulted Tamika in the first place, that they were not given this information of who assaulted Tamika. And because they didn't know this information, they had no concerns when Ted stated that, Mervyn has taken baby Charlie, because they didn't believe that baby Charlie was in danger. And they also stated that it's been known that many members of the Indigenous community share responsibilities of children, and their children are looked after by multiple members of the community. So they didn't think it was an issue. Yeah, the audacity. So Ted, he returns to Broome Police Station the next morning, and he is horrified to learn that a missing persons report has not even been made for baby Charlie, and the fact that they have not even begun looking for baby Charlie. Like, they didn't even start looking. At this point, Charlie had been missing for nearly 6 hours. I'm not even sure if Tamika even knew about this. She probably trusted that she hadn't heard anything, so she probably trusted that Charlie was just being taken care of by the people that he was left with. Meanwhile, Mervyn was around 460 kilometers away from Broome, and this was found out because he was caught stealing petrol, to which this man from the station, he calls 000 and reports him, Mervyn as stealing petrol. And then Mervyn was driving so erratically down the freeway that that another truck driver who just missed hitting him called 000 and reported this car is driving erratically on the road. Now, remember I said that Ted had actually told the police that Mervyn was driving his car at the time, so they knew which car Mervyn was driving. But because they didn't report this, put this down, take this freaking information seriously, this was another missed opportunity to find baby Charlie, because the car that Mervyn was driving, the make and model of it, was reported to them. And if they had actually noted it down, when these people called to report Mervyn, the people on the road as driving erratically, stealing petrol, etc., then that, license number plate, make, model of the car would have flashed up as, hey, that's Mervyn driving the car and he has baby Charlie. It would have at least alerted them, but nope, they dropped the ball. No, they didn't drop it. They failed to even throw it. It wasn't until 10 a.m. the next morning that the police go to interview Miss McKinley and Miss Hill, the ones who originally were supposed to be taking care of baby Charlie. And that's when they report baby Charlie as an abducted child. But the Perth headquarters, like police headquarters, wasn't even willing to accept this as like the label for Charlie being missing, because they said there's no clear threats that Charlie is in danger. No clear threats from Mervyn that he was actually going to go harm the child. So he's not an abducted child somehow. I guess they were waiting for Mervyn to actually do something to Charlie before they were going to take it seriously. So meanwhile, Tamika, she goes and discharges herself from hospital even though she's severely still injured, and she goes driving around town looking for Mervyn, but we know that Mervyn is very, very far away from town. Now, at 11:20 a.m. that day, a truck driver sees Mervyn's car. And he recognizes this car because he actually works for Ted at his truck driving company. So he's like, what's Ted's car doing here? So he calls Ted and he says, hey, your car's here. Like, is this you? Now Ted knows, oh my God, there's Mervyn. Thank goodness. Ted goes back to the police and says, okay, I know where Mervyn is. Like, I got a call. He is 800 kilometers away from Broome. He's at this location. So police say, okay, we're going to set up a roadblock, but we're going to set it up 600 kilometers away from where his current location is. That doesn't even make any sense. If he is here at A, why are they setting up the roadblock here at B, 600 kilometers away? I don't understand that. Like, it makes me so angry, and it almost seems like the police are doing everything they can to not do their job. So Ted's sister, who worked with CPS at the time, tells Ted, look, leave the station and let's handle this. We'll handle it. So she calls her friend who is a homicide detective. When this homicide detective hears about what's going on and how the situation's being handled, he's shocked and he's appalled. So he says, okay, don't speak to anyone. I'll be there on the next flight. Now, it wasn't until 12:57 p.m., okay, nearly 1 p.m., more than 13 hours after Charlie was abducted, that the Broome police call all the districts and put out an alert for missing Charlie. Tamika and Ted at this point just waited at the police station, hoping for some miracle that Mervyn was going to get caught, because nobody was doing their job. Nobody. Okay, now, so just before 2 p.m., Mervyn now bursts through the door of Fortescue Roadhouse, which was 930 kilometers away from Broome, where Charlie was abducted. He enters this roadhouse and he has Charlie in his arms and he's yelling out for help. He's yelling out Charlie's name, and then he places Charlie on one of these, one of the dining tables, and he calls and yells for an ambulance. Charlie had significant bruising all over his body, a large welt on the side of his head, and a mark on the center of his chest where it had begun to peel. His skin begun to peel. Mervyn was trying to perform CPR until another patron took over and really, really was trying. When paramedics arrived and they checked for a pulse, Charlie was dead. He had been with Mervyn for 15 hours at that point. Back at the station, Ted and Tamika were informed by police that Charlie was found, but allegedly they were told just bluntly, your baby's gone. Tamika and Ted lost it. Now, Charlie's postmortem is so upsetting, and it's actually quite a lot. So I'll read you what was found. So he had horrific injuries, but he had burns, abrasions, bruising, internal bleeding, a broken arm, and a broken leg. Together with, if that wasn't enough, his genitals were also severely injured. Yeah, 15 hours with Mervyn. A few days later, a memorial was held for Charlie where relatives from all over Australia just flew into Broome. Now, Mervyn claimed that Charlie fell out of his vehicle as they were driving at a high speed, and that's how these injuries were caused. He claimed that he had feared for his own safety if he had taken the injured Charlie back home to his mother. And he maintains the baby Charlie suffered these burns from the time that when they were driving, they stopped at like a swimming hole and he put him on like these hot rocks. And that's how these burns were caused. And he said it was at this swimming hole that when he was with him, Charlie like slid and fell face down into the water after Mervyn was playing with him, and he slipped between his legs, fell face down into the water, and that's when he stopped breathing. During the trial, the judge obviously concluded that was a lie and said that Mervyn inflicted these injuries on baby Charlie as revenge against his mother, Tamika. In 2014, Mervyn was found guilty of the rape and murder of 10-month-old baby Charlie. People in the court were just crying throughout the hearing. Mervyn was sentenced to life in prison, and 9 months later, in September 2015, Mervyn killed himself in prison. Of course, he was a coward. Tamika was relieved when she found out that Mervyn was dead. But that's not the end of this case. Soon, Tamika and Ted found themselves back in court because the Broome police decided to pursue the charges of Tamika assaulting a police officer and Ted obstructing justice against them, even after Charlie's murder. After her baby died, they chose to still try to get her convicted. A murder that took place because they didn't help prevent it. Anyway, when this was brought to court, the court didn't really agree, but they sort of did. Tamika got a suspended sentence and Ted got like a fine of $300, which even though the court considered this like merciful outcome, it's in fact bullshit, because now you are adding a criminal record to, which I don't know if they didn't have one before, but say they didn't have one before, you are now adding a criminal record to these Indigenous Australians for absolutely nothing, yet further intensifying the stereotype. The Mullaley family applied for a coronial inquest because they believed that Charlie's death was caused by lack of care and lack of duty from the police department, that their actions were caused by or contributed by the police's lack of action. So they did this also based on the ground that at the time when Ted asked that female police officer to take Charlie into her care, they refused that. Then they also said that like a coronial inquest is just justice, like it needs to be done. So when this was taken to court, the judge determined that the police not taking Charlie into their care was actually not directly related to Charlie's death. They stated that the police did not leave Charlie in Miss McKinley's and Miss Hill's care, but that Tamika did. Sorry, Ted did. Excuse me, that's not his fault. He asked the police officers to take Charlie into his care or arrange something, but they refused to do so. What were his options? Nothing. He didn't have any options. The judge held that Tamika's assault did not indicate an immediate and substantial risk to Charlie's well-being because he was in Miss Hill and Miss McKinley's care with Tamika's permission while the police were there. They stated that at the time, there was no indication that Mervyn had threatened to hurt the child, nor was Charlie exposed to Mervyn's assault. Like Mervyn just assaulted Tamika, so Charlie is safe, you know, like he didn't assault the baby, so he's not at risk. The judge also stated that when the officers wanted to arrest Tamika, that didn't mean that they were also exercising their right to take Charlie under their care and protection. But if you're going to arrest someone's mother and you're a baby, what if no one else was around? What were you going to do with the baby? Leave him on the street? And they said that the reason for this is because they didn't go and take Charlie into care because at the time of the incident, Charlie was actually not in his mother's care. He was in Miss McKinley and Miss Hill's care, which is apparently not true because he was only put in those girls' care when they wanted to arrest Tamika. The judge determined it was not necessary or required to perform this coronial inquest and that it wasn't going to show us any new evidence, so there's no point. So at the time of Mervyn's trial, Charlie's death was already investigated and it was actually the subject, obviously, of Mervyn's murder trial. And the Crime and Corruption Commission was already investigating this. So the judge was like, no, we're not going to do a further inquest into this because an inquest's job is to find the facts surrounding death. And in this case, it's not going to find or clarify any new or further details around Charlie's death. So these were all the reasons for denying it. The judge also stated that the coroner would not find any evidence linking the police to Charlie's death because the police never assumed Charlie into their care, so it wasn't their responsibility. You know, doing this inquest is going to cause further hurt and damage to people that would need to give evidence. Therefore, he just denied this request made by the Mullaley family. Now, it's been 9 years since that took place. What Tamika, her son, and her father endured at the hands of the police on March 20th, 2013, and all the years that followed, is yet to be acknowledged, apologized for, or remedied in any way, at least in the eyes of the Mullaley family. So 9 years on, the National Justice Project and the Mullaley family are not giving up their fight, and they continue to fight for justice for Charlie. This case is mind-blowing to me, and I think what's worse is that I've never heard of it. Tamika even made this statement. She states, "If you're a white baby and you're abducted, everyone knows your name. But I challenge people to name the Barrowville children who were murdered, and no one outside of the Indigenous community in WA have even heard of Baby Charlie." And that's true. I have never heard of him. And I'm ashamed to say I haven't heard of him. I am. But at the same time, like, the media needs to report these things. Like, I really am on the news. Like, I don't watch the news daily, but I mean, I've heard of these other cases. I mean, you know, you don't want to say it, but you're basically saying it. The fact that police literally did jack shit in the first 12 to 15 hours of Charlie's abduction is wild. They even had the name of the person who took the baby. They even had the make and model of the car, the location at a couple times of the man that took baby Charlie. On top of this being the man that violently beat the child's mother, then the fact that there is no accountability, like, what is going on? And then, I don't know, maybe I didn't do my research enough, but did Mervyn get tried for assaulting Tamika? Like, was that just up in the air? I honestly have no words, and I honestly hope police involved in that night feel horrible and, you know, work better from now on to protect everyone, not just the people that they deem worthy of their protection. Now, if you'd like to support the Mullaley family, they have a petition going on, and I will link it in the description box down below. I mean, they aren't even asking for money. They're literally just asking for support on this petition to get the police to take responsibility and just get justice for baby Charlie. So if you'd like to support them, please go ahead and do so. So let me know your thoughts on today's case down below, guys. If you're from Australia, can you let me know if you've heard of this case before? I feel like it's that much more important to share it because I have not heard of it. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Besitos. Mwah. Bye.